A poor little girl helped fix his car, but the ring on her finger left him speechless. The sun beat down relentlessly on the dusty back road that wound its way through the outskirts of Willow Creek. Sweat clung to Ethan Holloway's neck as he slammed the hood of his stalled BMW shut for the third time that hour. His GPS had died, his phone had no signal, and the radiator was hissing like a cornered snake. He cursed under his breath, loosening his tie and tossing his suit jacket onto the passenger seat. This was not how the day was supposed to go, not with the biggest investor meeting of his career just hours away. He looked around, hoping to spot a gas station or a mechanic shop, but there was nothing but flat fields and scattered, rusted barns. He was about to start walking when he heard footsteps, light and quick, crunching over the gravel. He turned and saw a girl no older than 10, barefoot and in a faded blue dress that hung off her small frame like a curtain. Her hair was tied in 2 uneven braids, and her cheeks were smudged with dirt. But what struck him most was her eyes, bright, golden brown and filled with curiosity. "Need help, mister?" she asked, her voice small but confident. Ethan blinked. I don't think you can help with a radiator, kiddo." She walked right past him to the front of the car, wiping her hands on her dress. "Sometimes it's just the hose. My grandpa taught me. He was a mechanic before he got sick." Ethan stood back, half amused, half desperate, as she opened the hood with a practiced motion and peered inside. She reached in and tugged gently at a loose hose clamp, then twisted it with a strength that belied her size. "You got a bottle of water?" she asked over her shoulder. "In the trunk," Ethan replied, already walking to get it. He returned and watched as she poured the water carefully into the reservoir, her little hands steady and sure. After a moment, she closed everything up and nodded. "Try it now." He slid behind the wheel, turned the key, and the engine coughed, then roared to life. Ethan's jaw dropped. He stepped out and looked at her in amazement. "You're kidding me. How did you—" She grinned but didn't say anything. Just as he reached into his wallet, ready to give her something for her trouble, his eyes landed on her left hand, and then his breath caught in his throat. The silver ring on her finger was small, old, and unmistakable. A delicate swirl of 2 intertwined bands, with a tiny emerald embedded in the center. It was one of a kind. He had it custom-made a decade ago. He'd given it to someone very special, someone he hadn't seen in over 9 years, someone who had disappeared without a trace. He took a step closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Where did you get that ring?" The girl looked down at her hand as if she had forgotten the ring was even there. She turned it slowly, the green gem catching the sunlight in a soft flicker. I've always had it," she said with a shrug. "My mom said it was lucky. She gave it to me when I was little." Ethan's heart pounded. His vision narrowed until all he could see was the ring, his ring. 1,000 memories surged to the surface. The night he had slipped it onto Isabella's finger under the stars, the promises they whispered, the tearful goodbye when she left without explanation. She had vanished with no phone call, no note. And now, nearly 10 years later, a little girl on a country road was wearing that exact ring. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice cracking. The girl hesitated. "Lena. Lena Brooks. Brooks, not Holloway." Still, Ethan clung to hope, his mind racing. "And your mom's name, what's her name?" "Isabel," she said, and Ethan swayed on his feet. The world tilted. It wasn't just coincidence. It couldn't be. "Isabel Brooks?" he asked. The girl nodded. "She's sick right now. That's why I'm staying with Mrs. Crane up the road. Mama says she'll get better soon." Ethan's chest tightened. Isabel was alive. She had a daughter, this daughter, and the age lined up too perfectly. Could Lena be his? He crouched down, his hands shaking. "Lena, how old are you?" "8, she said proudly. "Almost 9. 8. Isabel had disappeared 9 years ago. His voice faltered. "Did your mom ever talk about your dad?" Lena's smile faded. She looked at the ground. "She said he went away, that he didn't want to be found, but I think she was just sad when she said it." Ethan felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. It didn't make sense. He had looked for Isabel for months after she vanished, hired a private investigator, filed a missing persons report. Nothing ever came up. It was as if she had been erased. And now this little girl was standing in front of him, her wide eyes filled with something unspoken, as if a lifetime of secrets hovered just behind them. He reached out gently. "Lena, where is your mom now? Can you take me to her?" The girl hesitated, then looked up the dirt road, where a crooked mailbox stood at the edge of a long gravel driveway. "She's at the house, but she sleeps a lot now. Sometimes she doesn't wake up until the afternoon." Ethan stood, the ring burning into his mind like a brand. He didn't know what he was walking into, but every cell in his body told him he had to see Isabel again, even if she hated him, even if she never wanted to be found. He had to know. "Will you take me there?" he asked softly. Lena nodded and took his hand. The gravel crunched beneath their feet as Lena led Ethan up the narrow driveway lined with overgrown bushes and rusting lawn ornaments. The house at the end was small, white-painted wood peeling in places, with a sagging porch and a crooked wind chime whispering in the breeze. It didn't look like a place someone would choose to hide in. It looked like somewhere you ended up when the world had turned its back on you. Lena dropped his hand and bounded up the steps, pushing open the screen door with a creak. "Mrs. Crane, I'm back. I brought someone." From inside, the sound of a chair scraping the floor echoed, followed by slow, heavy footsteps. An older woman in her 60s appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She wore a faded apron and thick glasses, her graying hair tied back in a loose bun. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Ethan. "Who's this, Lena?" she asked, her voice wary. He needed help with his car," Lena said quickly. "I helped him, and he knows my mom." Mrs. Crane's gaze sharpened instantly. She stepped out onto the porch, blocking the door with her frame. "Knows your mom, huh?" Ethan cleared his throat. "My name is Ethan Holloway. I used to know Isabel a long time ago." The woman studied him for a moment, her eyes calculating. Then, without a word, she turned and motioned for him to follow. Inside, the house was dim and cool, the curtains drawn against the sun. The living room was cluttered with books, old photographs, and a worn sofa where a crocheted blanket lay folded neatly. The air smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. "She's in the back room," Mrs. Crane said, her tone softening just slightly. "Been in and out of bed for the past month. Doctor says it's her kidneys. We're waiting for a transplant, but the list is long, and we're short on everything else." Ethan followed her down a narrow hallway. His heart pounded with every step. He stopped outside the last door as Mrs. Crane knocked gently, then pushed it open. The room was dim, sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains. In the bed, propped up by pillows, lay Isabel. Her face was thinner, her skin pale, but the curve of her jaw, the delicate slope of her nose, the thick dark lashes, he would know her anywhere. She turned her head slowly at the sound of the door, her eyes blinking in confusion. "Mrs. Crane," she murmured. "Who?" Ethan stepped into the light. "Isabel." Her body went rigid. Her eyes locked onto his face, and for a moment, time stopped. The silence between them stretched like a chasm. Then she whispered, "Ethan." Her voice cracked. "How did you find me?" He stepped closer, his throat thick. "I didn't. Lena did." Isabel stared at him, her breath catching in her throat as if his presence had reached into the deepest part of her past and pulled it to the surface. She struggled to sit up straighter, clutching the blanket around her frail body. Her eyes welled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Her voice was a whisper. "I never thought I'd see you again." Ethan moved to the side of the bed, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. "I thought you were gone. I searched for you, Isabel. I looked everywhere." She gave a weak, bitter smile. "I know, I saw the missing posters. The private investigator came to my mother's house in Atlanta. But by then, it was too late. I'd already made a choice." "A choice?" he repeated, feeling the sting in her words. She looked away toward the small window beside her bed. "I was scared, Ethan. My father, he found out about us, about the baby, He said I had to disappear or he'd ruin you. He meant it. He had the money, the reach. I didn't want your life destroyed. Ethan's jaw clenched. He threatened you. He threatened you, she corrected, and he was capable of it. He'd already made some calls. I knew if I stayed, you'd lose your job, your future. I didn't want you dragged into my family's mess. You should have told me, he said, his voice trembling. I was 18, she whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with years of silence, unspoken fears and buried truths. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, opening it to reveal a small, worn photo. It was of Isabel, taken the night he gave her the ring. Her smile was bright, her eyes full of dreams. He handed it to her. I carried this for 9 years, he said. I never stopped wondering where you went, or why. She looked down at the photo, her lips trembling. I kept the ring, she said softly. Gave it to Lena when she turned 5. She always said it made her feel safe. Ethan swallowed hard. Is she mine? Isabel looked up, eyes wide and glassy. Her lips parted, but for a second she couldn't speak. Then she gave a tiny nod. Yes, she's your daughter. The words hit him like a wave, flooding his chest with emotion. Joy, anger, grief. He stood, backing away slightly, trying to steady his breathing. 8 years, and I never knew. I'm sorry, she said, tears finally falling. I thought I was protecting you, but I robbed you of so much. He walked to the window, staring out into the yard. The little girl who had fixed his car, his daughter, and Isabel, the woman he had once loved more than anything, lying in a bed of secrets. He turned slowly. What happens now? Isabel didn't answer right away. Her fingers curled tightly around the edge of the blanket, her face pale against the dim light. I don't know, she admitted. I didn't plan for this. I didn't think I'd ever have to. Ethan moved closer again, softer this time. I want to be part of her life, Isabel. I've missed nearly 9 years. I can't lose anymore. She doesn't know you, Isabel said gently, pain flickering behind her words. To her, you're just the man with the broken car. But she's my daughter, Ethan said, his voice thick. She has my eyes. She fixed my engine like she'd done it 100 times. She's brilliant and kind and... He stopped, trying to keep his emotions in check. Please, let me know her. Isabel gave him a long, searching look. She's never asked about you. Not directly. But I think she's always wondered. The way she watches other kids with their dads. I see it. I feel it. Then let me fill that space, he said, almost pleading. Let me be what I should have always been. She looked away, wiping at her eyes. I'm sick, Ethan, and I'm scared. Every day I wonder what will happen to her if I don't wake up. Mrs. Crane has been a blessing, but she's not family. She's not forever. I am, he said quietly. The silence between them was thick with weight. Finally she nodded, barely perceptible. We'll take it slow. She needs to know you, not just be told. I understand, he said. I'll earn her trust. And yours. A faint knock on the door broke the moment. Lena peeked in, clutching a small box. Mama, she said, looking between them. Are you okay? Isabel gave a fragile smile. Come here, sweetheart. Lena padded into the room and handed the box to Ethan. This is for you, she said. I was going to give it to Mrs. Crane, but I want you to have it. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny engine part, polished and wrapped in cloth. What's this? It's from Grandpa's toolbox, Lena said proudly. He said it fixes things that are important. Ethan stared at the small piece of metal, suddenly overwhelmed. Thank you, Lena. This means a lot, she smiled. You're welcome. He looked back at Isabel. Their eyes met, 1,000 feelings tangled in a single glance. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the floor. And then Isabel whispered, Ethan, there's something else I never told you. Ethan froze. The warmth from Lena's gift faded slightly, as Isabel's voice, barely more than a breath, carried a new weight. He turned slowly, heart thudding again, the echo of her words settling deep in his chest. She looked at him with a mix of sorrow and fear, as if she'd been holding this second secret behind her eyes for nearly a decade. "What is it?" he asked gently, stepping closer, shielding Lena slightly with his arm as a protective instinct kicked in. Isabel's hand trembled as she reached for the drawer in her nightstand. She opened it and pulled out a crumpled envelope, aged yellowed around the edges and sealed with the unmistakable wax insignia of her father's estate. She held it out to him. "I wasn't just running from him," she said. "He made sure you would never find me, and he made sure I'd stay silent." Ethan took the envelope with careful hands. Inside was a letter dated almost 9 years ago. The writing was elegant, formal, cruel in its civility. He read it, his expression hardening with every line. It was from Isabel's father. A threat, yes, but worse, a deal. If she disappeared, he promised to fund her escape, provide medical care when the time came, and keep her child hidden. In return, she had to cut ties with Ethan completely, no contact, no trace. Or else, he promised, he'd ruin Ethan's life and make sure their child never had a future. "I was 18, Isabel whispered again. "He wired money to a fake name, sent me here, to this town, to a friend of a friend. He made sure I had enough to survive, but never enough to leave." Ethan's hands tightened around the letter. "He blackmailed you." She nodded. "And I let him, because I thought it was the only way to keep you safe." Rage flared in Ethan's chest, hot and suffocating. "He destroyed both our lives. He took my daughter from me. He made you live like this." "I know," she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I hated him for it, but I was too scared to fight back." Ethan stood, pacing the small room, trying to breathe. "Is he still alive?" "No," she said. "He died 2 years ago. Heart attack." Ethan stopped in his tracks. "Then why didn't you—" "I didn't know how," she said. "So much time had passed, and I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me, afraid you'd moved on." He walked back to her, kneeling again, his voice hoarse. "I never moved on, Isabel. I couldn't. I loved you. I still—" But his words trailed off, caught between what was and what might still be. Lena, sitting quietly at the edge of the bed, looked up with wide eyes. "You loved my mom?" she asked softly. Ethan turned to Lena, her small face filled with innocence and an emotion she didn't yet have words for. His heart twisted at the question, so simple, so pure, yet loaded with the weight of a past she couldn't understand. "Yes," he said softly, "I did. Very much." Lena looked to her mother, who gave her a slow, nodding smile. "He loved me before you were even born," Isabel said gently, "back when we were just kids ourselves." Lena blinked. "So, were you going to get married?" Isabel let out a soft laugh, one filled with bittersweet memories. "We planned to. We used to talk about it all the time." Ethan added, "We were young, but we knew what we wanted, and we had this silly dream of living in a little cabin near a lake." "That doesn't sound silly," Lena said with a frown. "No," Ethan agreed. "It doesn't. Not anymore." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in the memories and the sudden closeness that felt both strange and natural. Then Isabel shifted, her body weary from the emotional strain. She winced. Ethan rose immediately. "You should rest." But Isabel grabbed his hand, holding it with surprising strength. "There's more you need to know," she said. Ethan leaned in. "Tell me." "Lena doesn't know," Isabel began slowly, "but I've been getting worse. The dialysis helps, but it's not enough. If I don't get a transplant soon—" Her voice broke. Ethan squeezed her hand tighter. "You will. We'll find a way." "I've been on a wait list for a year," she said. "Mrs. Crane's been helping, but the doctors, they're not optimistic." Ethan's mind raced. He had resources now, money, connections, things he didn't have when they were kids. He could do something. "I'll get you moved to the best hospital today. I don't care what it costs." Isabel looked skeptical. "Ethan, I mean it," he cut in. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." Isabel's eyes filled again. She nodded, just once, exhausted but hopeful. "Then do it for Lena," she said. "Promise me that no matter what happens, she won't be alone." He turned to the little girl now curled up at the foot of the bed, watching them both with quiet wonder. "She won't be," he said. "I swear." Lena reached for Isabel's hand. "Mama, are you going to be okay?" Isabel smiled through her tears. "I am now." A sharp knock on the front door shattered the moment. Mrs. Crane's voice called from the hallway, tense and alarmed. "Ethan, there's someone here asking for you, says it's urgent." He frowned. "Who?" "I don't know, but he says he's your brother." Ethan's breath hitched. "My brother?" he echoed, stunned. "That's impossible. I don't have a brother." Mrs. Crane's voice grew sharper. "Well, he sure thinks he is. He's standing on my porch with a file and says he's got answers you need. Should I send him away?" Isabel looked up at Ethan, confusion mirroring his own. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "No, let him in." Moments later, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. A man stepped into the room, tall, mid-30s, neatly dressed, with the same hazel eyes Ethan saw in the mirror every morning. His expression was guarded, but curious. He carried a leather folder under one arm and looked between Ethan and Isabel before settling his gaze. "Ethan Holloway?" he asked. Ethan stood, crossing his arms instinctively. "That's me." The man offered a tight smile. "I'm Daniel Holloway. I'm your half-brother." Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. "That's not possible." "I thought so too," Daniel said, stepping forward and opening the folder. "But our father, Robert Holloway, wasn't who he pretended to be. He had another family. Mine. Our mother never knew until he passed. We found letters, documents, DNA test results. I tried reaching out through your company's legal office, but no one returned the calls." Ethan stared at him, trying to process. His father had died nearly 5 years ago, quietly, without fanfare and with little left behind. Or so he thought. "You're saying our father was living a double life?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, and there's more." He handed Ethan the folder. Inside were several pages of financial records, handwritten notes, and at the very top, a copy of a trust fund established in Ethan's name, co-signed by Robert Holloway and another man. Ethan flipped through the pages, eyes widening. "This is a trust? For me?" "And for her," Daniel added, nodding toward Lena. Isabel's eyes narrowed. "How would your father know about Lena?" Daniel exhaled. "That's why I'm here. Our father. He kept tabs on Ethan for years. Had a private investigator following him. I think he knew about Isabel, about the child. This trust was created right after Ethan filed the missing persons report. I think he found you and kept it to himself." Ethan looked at Isabel, stunned. "My father knew and said nothing?" Daniel nodded. "He was a complicated man. He hid things from both of us, but now that he's gone, I wanted to find you and make things right." The folder trembled slightly in Ethan's hands. Questions spun in his mind, 1,000 what-ifs. He looked at Lena, still holding Isabel's hand, blissfully unaware of the storm unraveling around her. Daniel spoke again, softer now. "There's a clause in the trust. If a legitimate heir, Lena, was found, the funds are to be used for her health, education, or medical emergencies related to either parent." Isabel's breath caught. "Are you saying this trust could pay for my transplant?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, if you'll let it." Ethan met Isabel's gaze, and for the first time hope felt like something real. Silence settled over the room like a fragile glass dome, everyone suspended within it, unsure what to say next. Ethan clutched the folder tightly, the weight of the revelation pressing into his chest. The idea that his father, cold, distant, pragmatic to the point of cruelty, had orchestrated this trust without ever telling him, sent a chill through his bones. Isabel's voice broke the stillness. Why would he do that? Why go through all the trouble to hide everything and then leave a way to fix it? Daniel shook his head slowly. "I don't know. maybe guilt. Maybe he was trying to make amends in the only way he knew how: money. He wasn't a kind man, but he was meticulous, calculated. This trust, it's him, trying to control from beyond the grave. Ethan moved to Isabel's bedside again. Regardless of his reasons, this could change everything. If this trust can cover your surgery, we can get you into a top hospital immediately. Isabel looked away, her hand slipping into Lena's. And what happens after, Ethan? When the doctors are gone, when the money is used? What then? He crouched beside her. Then I stay. I'm not here because of a trust fund. I'm here because of you. Because of Lena. Lena looked up, sensing the heaviness in the room. Mama, what's a transplant? Isabel smiled sadly. It's a special operation that might help me get better, baby, so I can stay with you longer. Lena frowned. But you're not leaving, right? Isabel pulled her daughter into a hug, holding her tightly. I'll fight as hard as I can, sweetheart. I promise. Ethan stood, turning to Daniel. How fast can this be processed? I've already spoken to a legal team. If you sign, I can have everything moving by the end of the day. But there's one more thing you should see. Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out an old photograph. It was faded, black and white. In it, a younger version of Robert Holloway stood beside a woman Ethan didn't recognize, holding a toddler with curly dark hair. Ethan took the photo slowly. Who is this? Daniel pointed. That's my mother, and the boy in her arms is me. But look closer at the woman's necklace. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Hanging from her neck was a pendant, small, round, inset with a single emerald. A match to the gem in Lena's ring. Ethan looked back at Isabel. Where did your father get the ring he gave you? She blinked. He said it was an heirloom from his business partner's estate. Daniel nodded. Our fathers were connected, more than we thought. Ethan, I think there's more to this story than just a lost love. Ethan's mind reeled as another layer of mystery settled in. The ring, the trust, the strange, tangled legacy their fathers left behind. Whatever this is, Ethan said, we're going to uncover it, together. But outside, a dark sedan pulled into the gravel driveway, and inside it sat a man with sharp eyes and a file of his own. The soft crunch of tires over gravel broke the quiet resolve inside the house. Ethan turned toward the window, catching a glimpse of the black sedan pulling to a stop beside the crooked mailbox. The vehicle was sleek, polished, too refined for the rural landscape, and the man who stepped out was no neighbor. He was tall, lean, and dressed in a gray suit that clung to him like armor. His sunglasses reflected the house as he closed the car door with calculated precision. He moved with purpose, a leather briefcase in one hand and an envelope in the other. Ethan's stomach dropped. Daniel looked over Ethan's shoulder and muttered, I've seen him before. He was at our father's memorial. A lawyer. His name is Carlyle. Mrs. Crane knocked once before pushing open the bedroom door, her voice low and urgent. There's another visitor. Says he's here about the trust. Isabel's breath caught, and she instinctively pulled Lena closer. Ethan rose, his jaw tightening. I'll handle it. He met Carlyle at the front door. The man offered a businesslike smile and a firm handshake that felt more like a challenge. Mr. Holloway, I represent the firm of Grayson, Beck & Carlyle. I'm here to deliver a supplementary notice regarding the Holloway Trust. Ethan folded his arms. You're late. Daniel already explained the terms. Carlyle's smile didn't waver. Ah, yes, Mr. Daniel Holloway, a surprise heir. Very exciting. However, what your brother may not be aware of is a final clause, one only triggered upon identification of the child, Miss Lena Brooks. Ethan's brow furrowed. What clause? Carlyle opened the envelope and handed him a notarized document. Ethan scanned it quickly, his eyes catching on key phrases: guardianship, contingent beneficiary, court petition for custody transfer. His blood ran cold. What the hell is this? Carlyle folded his hands. Your father anticipated that if the mother was found to be medically unfit or incapacitated, the trust would shift full guardianship to the Holloway family, specifically to the next of kin deemed most capable. That could be you, Mr. Holloway. Or it could be someone else. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. Someone else? Carlyle nodded, then glanced at the car. The rear door opened slowly. A woman stepped out, elegant, cold. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her heels sank slightly into the gravel as she approached. Isabel's mother. Ethan's eyes widened. She's involved in this? Carlyle said calmly. She's filed a motion with the probate court. Based on Isabel's medical condition, she's requesting emergency custody of Lena, effective immediately. Ethan's throat went dry. From inside the house, he heard Isabel call out faintly, "What's happening?" He looked back, heart racing, and saw Lena standing in the hallway, eyes wide with fear. And then the woman stepped forward and said, "I'm here for my granddaughter." Ethan moved instinctively, placing himself between the woman and the door. His voice was ice. "You don't get to walk in here after all these years and claim anything, least of all Lena." The woman raised a finely arched eyebrow. "I'm her blood, Mr. Holloway, and I have legal grounds. My daughter is clearly unwell. And you," she glanced at him with cold disdain, "are a stranger." Daniel stepped forward, voice steady but tense. "You're Isabel's mother. Why now? Why didn't you come when she was broke or sick or raising a child alone?" She looked at Daniel without flinching. "Because she cut me off. She ran away and wanted nothing to do with me. I respected that, until now." "Until a child's future was placed at risk." Ethan snorted. "So you suddenly care about your granddaughter? This is about control." "It's about stability," she snapped. "About responsibility. That little girl needs structure, medical insurance, private schooling. What can this rundown shack and an out-of-nowhere father offer her?" "Love," Isabel's voice rasped from the hallway. Everyone turned. She was leaning against the doorframe, pale and trembling, but upright, her hand gripping the wall for balance. "Lena has love. She has me, and she's starting to have Ethan. That's more than you ever gave me." Her mother's face barely moved, but a flicker of something passed through her eyes. "You were a reckless child. You needed discipline." "I needed kindness," Isabel whispered, "and when I couldn't find it, I ran." Ethan stepped beside her. "You're not taking Lena. We'll fight this." Carlyle cleared his throat. "There's already a court summons, Mr. Holloway. A judge will make the decision. Your father's trust made this inevitable, and unless you can prove medical and emotional stability for Miss Brooks's current guardianship, the court may side with the grandmother." Isabel swayed slightly. Ethan caught her. "Then we prove it," he said. "We prove Isabel is still capable, and if not, I'll take full custody. I'm her father. That has to count for something." Carlyle tilted his head. "It does. But there's history to overcome, abandonment, secrets, no legal record of paternity." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we start now. DNA test, character witnesses. We bring every truth into the light." Daniel added, "And I'll testify. I'll verify Ethan's readiness and we'll uncover everything our father buried." Carlyle looked between them all. "You have until the hearing. 48 hours." The lawyer and Isabel's mother turned and walked to the car. Ethan's fists clenched as the engine roared to life and the sedan disappeared down the road. Inside the house, Isabel collapsed into his arms, her voice weak. "She can't take her, Ethan. I couldn't bear it." He held her tighter. "She won't." But across the room, Lena stood frozen, silent, wide-eyed, realizing for the first time that someone wanted to take her away. Lena stood rooted in place, her small frame tense, her fingers clutching the edge of the hallway wall like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. The light in her eyes, the curious spark Ethan had seen when she fixed his car, had dimmed, replaced by confusion and a flickering fear she didn't know how to name. Isabel tried to go to her, but her knees buckled. Ethan moved swiftly, catching her before she fell. "You need to lie down," he said gently. "No," she gasped. "Lena, I've got her, Ethan promised. He turned to Lena, crouching to her level. Hey, he said softly. Come here. She didn't move. Lena, that woman, your grandma, she scared you, didn't she? Lena's lip trembled. She looked at me like I was a problem. Ethan's heart cracked. You're not a problem, okay? Not ever. You're a miracle. Her eyes filled with tears. Is she really gonna take me away from Mama? Ethan reached out and slowly, she crossed the space between them, burying her face into his chest. We're not gonna let that happen, he said, wrapping his arms around her. Your mom and I, we're going to fight with everything we have. From the bed, Isabel watched through damp lashes, her breathing shallow. She doesn't know love, she said. That woman, my mother, she knows control, pride, appearances, not love. Ethan nodded. That's why she's not going to win. Daniel stepped in. You'll need proof, Ethan, that you're the father, that you're stable, that you and Isabel are the best option for Lena. We'll get it, Ethan said. I've already called a lawyer. He's flying in tomorrow. Good, Daniel said, because Carlisle's no ordinary lawyer. He's one of the sharpest in the state, and he won't play fair. Ethan turned to Isabel. Can you hold on through this? She managed a weak smile. I've waited 9 years for you to find us. I'll hold on as long as it takes. Then we start now, he said. The next hours moved in a blur of planning. Daniel made calls to a private lab to expedite a DNA test. Ethan reached out to his assistant back in the city to compile character references, financial records, anything to prove his readiness. Meanwhile, Mrs. Crane sat beside Isabel, helping her eat, keeping her spirits up. But when the house fell quiet again and Lena had finally dozed off, curled between her mother and Ethan on the bed, Isabel whispered, There's still something you don't know. Ethan turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. What is it? She looked at him, her eyes haunted. My mother. She's not here just to win custody. She's here because she knows something about Lena, something I've kept hidden for years. Ethan stiffened. What are you talking about? She knows who Lena's grandfather really was, Isabel said, and what he did. Ethan sat frozen beside Isabel, the faint rhythm of Lena's breathing, the only thing grounding him in the moment. Her words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, each syllable carrying the weight of secrets long buried. What do you mean? He asked quietly, careful not to wake Lena. What did your father do? Isabel stared at the ceiling, her hands trembling atop the blanket. It wasn't just threats, it wasn't just exile. He was part of something darker, something I ran from because I was afraid it would touch Lena too. Ethan's throat tightened. Tell me. She hesitated, then began, her voice raw and distant. My father, Philip Brooks, wasn't just a controlling man. He was ruthless in business, cold in life, and obsessed with power. When I got pregnant, he was furious. But not because I was young or unwed, because of who you were. Me? Ethan asked, startled. He found out who your father was, Isabel said. Robert Holloway, they were business rivals, bitter ones. My father thought if people knew his daughter had a child with a Holloway, it would weaken his legacy, make him look vulnerable. He said Lena would be a liability. Ethan clenched his fists. He wanted her erased. Isabel nodded. He offered me money to terminate the pregnancy. When I refused, he started making threats. Then, one night, he cornered me in his office. He told me that if I kept the child, he would make sure she paid for my mistake her entire life, that he'd have her followed, controlled, that she'd never be free. Ethan stood, pacing. Why didn't you tell me this back then? I didn't know how, she whispered. You were just starting your career. You had everything ahead of you and I was drowning. I thought hiding was the only way to protect her. Ethan turned to her, voice shaking. And now your mother knows this. She was there, Isabel said. She saw what he did to me, but she kept his secrets, and now she's trying to use them. If she gains custody, she'll rewrite the narrative, paint me as unstable, you as absent, and Lena as an asset. Ethan felt sick. An asset for what? Isabel's eyes met his. For a legacy. My mother's preparing to relaunch the Brooks Foundation, make Lena the face of it. The granddaughter of Philip Brooks, heir to a story that's been whitewashed of all its cruelty. Daniel, who had been quietly listening in the corner, stepped forward. She's using Lena to rewrite history. Yes, Isabel said, and if she wins custody, she'll own her. Legally, publicly. She'll raise her in that world of cold promises and spotless images until Lena becomes someone she's not. Ethan looked down at his sleeping daughter, curled beside him, clutching a frayed stuffed bear. No, he said fiercely, we won't let that happen. But even as the vow left his lips, a soft chime echoed from his phone. He picked it up and stared at the screen. It was a notification from his lawyer. Court hearing moved, now set for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Ethan's pulse thundered as he read the message again. The court hearing had been moved up, with less than 24 hours to prepare. He stood abruptly, the phone still in his hand, the room around him spinning. Isabel sat up straighter despite her weakness, her face paling further. Tomorrow, she whispered. That's not enough time. We haven't even gotten the test results yet. Ethan's jaw clenched. This is Carlisle. He's pushing the timeline. They're trying to corner us before we can fight back. Daniel pulled out his own phone. I'll call the lab. We'll pay triple for a rush. I'll call the lawyer too. He'll need to know this now. Mrs. Crane appeared at the door, clutching a tray with medicine. Are you all right in here? I heard shouting. Court's in the morning, Ethan said quickly. They're trying to take Lena before we can prove anything. Mrs. Crane set the tray down with a clatter. Over my dead body. Lena stirred at the sound of voices, blinking up at them with sleepy eyes. What's going on? Isabel smoothed her daughter's hair. Nothing you need to worry about right now, sweetheart. Just go back to sleep, okay? Lena sat up instead. I heard you talking. That lady's gonna take me, isn't she? Ethan knelt by the bed. Hey, look at me. No one is going to take you. Not if I can help it. I'm going to fight for you, just like your mom did all these years. She stared at him for a long moment. Even if they say you're not my dad? I am, he said with conviction. And we'll prove it. Promise? She asked, holding out her pinky. Ethan locked his pinky around hers. Promise. That night, the house didn't sleep. Isabel lay in bed with Lena tucked beside her, whispering soft memories into her ear, singing old lullabies. Daniel worked the phone like a machine, coordinating statements from old professors, business partners, anyone who could vouch for Ethan's character and readiness as a father. Ethan reviewed documents, timelines, and the court filings Daniel's lawyer had sent over. Just after midnight, the DNA lab called. Daniel answered on speaker. Results are conclusive, the technician said. Ethan Holloway is the biological father of Lena Brooks, a 99 to 98% match. Ethan closed his eyes. Relief poured through him, sudden and overwhelming. Isabel squeezed his hand, tears running silently down her cheeks. The lawyer called next. We'll need everything documented, copies printed and notarized by 8 a.m. I'll meet you outside the courthouse. It's going to be a battle. Carlisle plays to win. Ethan stood, his mind clearing with purpose. Then so do I. And as dawn threatened the edge of the sky, Ethan walked into Lena's room to find her awake, curled on the windowsill, staring at the first light. When I go in there tomorrow, he told her, I'm going to tell them the truth, all of it, about you, about your mom, about everything we lost, and everything we're going to protect. She nodded solemnly. Can I come too? He hesitated. Are you sure? I want to tell them, she said, that I'm not afraid, that I choose you. Ethan swallowed hard. Then we do it together. The courtroom was colder than Ethan expected, both in temperature and atmosphere. Rows of wooden benches lined the room, filled with spectators, attorneys, and officials whispering behind hands. At the front sat the judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for efficiency. The clock above her head ticked down the final minutes before the hearing would begin. Ethan stood beside his lawyer, every document neatly arranged in the folder he gripped tightly. Daniel sat in the row behind them, nodding when Ethan glanced back. Mrs. Crane was beside Isabel, who had insisted on attending despite the toll it took on her body. She looked frail, but there was steel in her spine, and between them, dressed in a clean blue dress with her braids tied neatly, was Lena. Across the aisle sat Isabel's mother, perfectly composed in a charcoal grey suit, her lawyer whispering into her ear. Carlyle stood beside him, scanning the courtroom with a predator's calm. "All rise," the bailiff called. Everyone stood as Judge Martinez entered, settling behind the bench. She glanced over her notes before lifting her gaze. "We are here today regarding the emergency custody petition filed on behalf of Margaret Brooks, citing concerns over the fitness of the child's biological mother and the unclear paternity of the father present. Is that correct?" Carlyle stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We're seeking immediate transfer of custody to the maternal grandmother." Judge Martinez nodded, then turned her attention to Ethan's side. "Mr. Holloway, are you prepared to respond?" Ethan rose. "We are, Your Honor." The judge waved them forward. "Proceed." Ethan took a deep breath, then stepped up to the table. "Your Honor, I didn't know my daughter existed until 3 days ago. But in that time I've found her. I've met her mother again, and I've seen with my own eyes the love and safety that surrounds this child." He handed over the DNA test. "This proves I am Lena's father biologically, but I'm here to prove I'm her father in every way that matters." The judge skimmed the results, then motioned. "Continue." "My partner and I have coordinated documentation of my stability, financial, professional, and emotional," he said. "We have testimonials from educators, business partners, and even medical advisors. But more importantly, Lena knows who she is. She knows where she belongs." He turned to Lena and gently motioned her forward. She walked to his side and looked up at the judge with wide, brave eyes. "Would you like to say something, Lena?" the judge asked kindly. Lena nodded. "I didn't know I had a dad, but now I do, and I love him. He listens to me. He sees me. And I want to stay with him and Mama." The courtroom fell still. Isabel's mother stood abruptly. "This is emotional manipulation." But the judge raised a hand. "Enough." She looked over the documents, then at Ethan, then at Isabel. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice calm but resolute. "This court will take a recess. Upon return, I will deliver my ruling." As the gavel fell, Ethan exhaled slowly, but his hands were shaking. Behind him, Carlyle leaned toward Margaret Brooks and whispered something cold and calculating. And for a moment, the look in her eyes changed, from control to something closer to panic. The hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with whispers and hurried footsteps, but to Ethan everything felt muffled, as if the world were holding its breath. He stood by the tall courthouse window, staring out at the city, hands clenched in his pockets. Behind him, Lena sat on a bench beside Isabel, holding her mother's hand with quiet strength beyond her years. Daniel approached, his expression tight. "Carlyle's maneuvering something. I can feel it. He knows they're losing on emotion, so he's going to pivot to legality, dig up anything to make you look unstable." Ethan turned sharply. "Let him. I have nothing to hide." Daniel hesitated. "Maybe not. But your father did. There's more in that trust document than we understood. I looked again at the appendices. There's a sealed section marked with initials, MB. Margaret Brooks," Ethan guessed. "But why would it be sealed in a trust for Lena?" Daniel lowered his voice. "Because I think our father and Margaret weren't just rivals. I think they were co-conspirators, partners in something that went very wrong." Ethan's stomach twisted. "What kind of something?" Daniel pulled out a folded page from his briefcase and handed it over. "There's a memo in the trust estate files, a list of offshore accounts each tied to a foundation, some registered to our father, some to Isabel's." Ethan read through the names. One stood out, Aurelia Holdings. He'd seen that before, on the donation list for the Brooks Foundation. "They were laundering money," he muttered. And Lena, as the heir to both legacies, is suddenly very valuable to people trying to clean up old sins. Ethan paced. So this custody case, it's not just about control, it's about protecting themselves. If Isabel has full custody, she could expose it. Exactly, Daniel said. But if Margaret wins, she locks it all down. Ethan turned toward the bench where Isabel sat, her body frail but her eyes watching him with unspoken understanding. She knew, maybe not the full scope, but she had always known her parents were hiding something dangerous. And now, they were trying to do it all again, through Lena. The bailiff reappeared at the end of the hall. Judge Martinez is ready. Time to return. As they gathered their things, Ethan bent down to Lena, brushing a hand over her shoulder. You did amazing in there. I'm proud of you. She looked up, serious. Will the judge believe me? Ethan hesitated, then nodded. I think she already does, but we have to be strong one more time, okay? She nodded back, gripping his fingers tightly. They filed into the courtroom once more. The judge entered shortly after, stone-faced, unreadable. She glanced over her papers, then lifted her gaze to address the room. This case has presented unique and deeply emotional factors, but the law demands clarity. I have reviewed all submitted evidence, and I am prepared to deliver my ruling. Everyone leaned forward, tense, breathless. But before she could finish, Carlyle stood abruptly. Your Honor, new evidence has emerged. Evidence that calls into question the integrity of both parents' claims. The room gasped. Ethan's pulse spiked. Carlyle held up a document. A sealed transcript from a private investigator hired 9 years ago by Robert Holloway, detailing a second, unacknowledged paternity claim involving Lena Brooks. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the judge blinked, momentarily thrown off by Carlyle's bombshell. Ethan's world tilted beneath him, the word second paternity claim ringing in his ears like a siren. He took a sharp breath, forcing himself to stand tall as the judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Mr. Carlyle, she said with careful control, are you suggesting that the paternity of Lena Brooks is in question after a legally certified DNA test has confirmed Mr. Holloway as the biological father? Carlyle adjusted his tie. No, Your Honor. The DNA test is accurate. Mr. Holloway is the biological father. However, the transcript reveals that a second man, also a Holloway, was once alleged by Isabel's father to have fathered the child. This calls into question the credibility of Isabel's past testimony and raises concerns about a potential cover-up involving the Holloway estate itself. Ethan's stomach twisted. This is absurd. Carlyle turned toward him with a rehearsed air of sympathy. Perhaps your father, in a bid to protect his name and assets, manipulated the circumstances. We simply ask for time to review the full investigative record. The judge drummed her fingers on the bench. You've had ample time, Mr. Carlyle. Carlyle lifted a hand. With respect, this document only surfaced yesterday during a review of the Holloway estate's sealed financial files. We believe it was intentionally buried, possibly to keep the truth from emerging. Daniel rose quickly. Your Honor, this is a tactic. They've had access to the estate records for months, and this so-called second claim isn't about the child's identity. It's about smearing Isabel's name and muddying the case. The judge considered him, then turned to Isabel. Ms. Brooks, do you know anything about this alleged second claim? Isabel's voice was quiet but steady. Yes. A collective murmur rippled through the room. I knew about it, she said, because it was a lie. My father invented it when I refused to obey him. He told me he'd spread the rumor that I'd been seeing your father and his brother Ethan, that it wasn't clear who the father was. But it was never true. She looked directly at the judge. Ethan is the only man I was ever with. I was a scared, desperate girl, but I never lied about that. I never doubted for a second who Lena's father was. The judge studied her. And why didn't you disclose this before? Because I thought it would be used against us, Isabel said. And I was right. Carlyle stepped forward again. Then let it be entered into the record that the witness admits to concealing potential legal complications. No, Ethan interrupted. She protected her child from a malicious lie. That doesn't make her unfit. It makes her human. The judge's gavel struck once. Enough. She looked down at her notes for a long, heavy moment. I am not inclined to delay these proceedings for speculative reports that were buried for nearly a decade and raise more questions than answers. Unless Mr. Carlyle has something concrete, more than whispers from a dead man, I will proceed. Carlyle's jaw tightened. No, Your Honor. Judge Martinez nodded once. Very well. She picked up the final folder from her desk. This court has reached a decision regarding the guardianship of Lena Brooks. Ethan held his breath. Isabel closed her eyes. And Lena reached silently for her mother's hand. Judge Martinez looked out across the courtroom, her gaze steady and unreadable. The room held still as if suspended in the space between one breath and the next. Outside, the sunlight filtered in through tall windows, catching dust in the air like glitter, but inside, time seemed frozen. This case, she began, has presented challenges both legal and emotional. It's clear to this court that the child in question, Lena Brooks, has been loved and protected by her mother to the best of her ability. It is also clear that Ethan Holloway is her biological father, and based on the evidence provided, a man who is willing and able to assume responsibility for his daughter. Isabel gripped Lena's hand tighter. Ethan stood, barely breathing. The judge turned a page. Regarding Ms. Margaret Brooks' petition, while her standing as a blood relative is not in dispute, this court finds that her sudden reappearance, combined with conflicting interests tied to the Brooks Foundation and its financial dealings, presents concerns about motive. Margaret's composure cracked. Her eyes narrowed as she leaned toward her lawyer, whispering furiously. Judge Martinez continued, undeterred. This court is unwilling to place a vulnerable child in the care of someone whose intentions may not align with the child's best interest. Carlyle stood abruptly. Your Honor, if I may. You may not, Judge Martinez said sharply. Sit down. Carlyle obeyed, jaw clenched. She looked back to Ethan. Mr. Holloway, while your sudden entrance into Lena's life would typically require a probationary review, your immediate actions, including acquiring DNA proof, coordinating legal counsel, and demonstrating financial and emotional readiness, have convinced this court that you are sincere in your intent to be a father. Ethan's knees nearly buckled. This court hereby rules that full legal custody of Lena Brooks shall remain with her mother, Isabel Brooks. Joint legal and physical custody shall be granted to her biological father, Ethan Holloway, with immediate effect. A collective gasp erupted. Lena turned, looking up at Ethan, her eyes wide. Does that mean? Ethan nodded, smiling through the tears beginning to form. It means I get to be your dad. The judge raised her hand once more. Furthermore, this court orders that Margaret Brooks have no legal claim to guardianship, visitation, or custodial influence, pending a formal investigation into the financial operations of the Brooks Foundation. Margaret shot to her feet. You can't do this. The gavel slammed down. I can, and I have. Margaret was escorted from the room by security as she spat words no one could quite hear. Carlyle packed up silently, a look of defeat painted across his usually smug features. When the courtroom finally cleared, Ethan turned to Isabel and knelt beside her chair. She was crying, quiet, stunned tears that wouldn't stop falling. You did it, she whispered. You gave her a future. We did it, he said. Together. Lena squeezed between them, wrapping her arms around both, her face buried in their shoulders. And for a moment, there were no legal documents, no courtrooms, no enemies, just the quiet, undeniable beginning of a family finally made whole. But outside the courthouse, in a black car parked just beyond view, a man flipped through photographs of Lena and Isabel. His phone buzzed once. Proceed, he said, and the car drove away. That night, the house on the edge of Willow Creek was filled with a kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full of relief, full of exhaustion, full of unspoken words too heavy to say aloud just yet. Isabel lay in her bed, propped by pillows, a soft blanket draped across her lap. Her color was better, her breathing steadier, but Ethan didn't leave her side for more than a few minutes at a time. Lena danced barefoot in the hallway, clutching the court documents like a trophy. "They said I could live with you both," she beamed. "Forever." Ethan smiled from the doorway. "Forever sounds perfect to me." Daniel stepped in from the porch, holding a laptop. "I got a response from the financial investigator. You need to see this." Ethan took the laptop and sat beside Isabel. On the screen was a series of files, ledgers, offshore wire transfers, and one damning internal email exchange between Robert Holloway and Philip Brooks. "They knew," Ethan said, scrolling through the documents. "They planned everything." "The trust fund, the separation," Daniel added. "It was all part of a backdoor deal to avoid federal scrutiny on their joint holdings. They used Isabel's pregnancy as leverage, hid it all under fake charities." Isabel looked stunned. "So Lena was the reason they made peace?" Ethan nodded. "They thought if they controlled her life, they could protect their legacies." "And now?" Isabel asked. Daniel clicked a final file. "Now we hand this over. The DOJ has already launched an inquiry into the Brooks Foundation. With these files, they'll finally see what's been happening behind closed doors." Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky. Rain began to fall softly against the windows, a late spring storm rolling in. Lena curled up on the couch, wrapped in a quilt, her eyes heavy with sleep. Mrs. Crane handed her a warm mug of milk and whispered a lullaby. Ethan stood and walked to the window, watching the lightning flash across the dark horizon. "What happens to us now?" he asked. Isabel joined him, leaning gently on his arm. "We raise our daughter. We find peace, maybe even forgiveness." He looked at her, the years between them shrinking to nothing. "Do you think we can be what we once dreamed of?" She gave a tired smile. "Maybe not what we were, but maybe something better, wiser." He nodded slowly. "I'd like that." She turned to walk back to bed, but paused. "You saw the man outside the courthouse, didn't you?" Ethan froze. "What man?" "The one watching us in the car. He had a camera." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Yeah, I saw him. I thought he was with the press." "No," Isabel whispered. "He wasn't. He's someone else." Daniel overheard. "I'll trace the plates." Isabel looked at Ethan, a chill in her voice. "This isn't over, is it?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet." And outside, far from the warmth of their fragile haven, the man in the car sat at a diner booth, phone pressed to his ear. "Phase 2 is in motion," he said. "The Holloway girl won't be safe for long." The next morning dawned grey and cold, clouds still heavy with the storm that had passed through the night. In the quiet kitchen, Ethan sipped coffee at the window, watching the wind toss the trees. He hadn't slept. The celebration of the court victory had been short-lived, overshadowed by Isabel's fear and that man in the car. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones. Behind him, Daniel typed furiously at the kitchen table, files spread across the wood like a puzzle begging to be solved. Isabel slept late, her body slowly recovering. Lena was still in bed, her stuffed bear clutched tight to her chest. Ethan's phone buzzed. "Unknown number." He answered. "Hello?" The voice was low, distorted. "You've been given something that doesn't belong to you." Ethan stood instantly, pulse accelerating. "Who is this?" "Lena's not safe. The truth will bury all of you." The line went dead. Ethan slammed the phone on the counter. "We're being watched, and they know we have the financial files." Daniel didn't look up. "That call came from a burner in DC. I can trace the tower. But Ethan, we need to move them, Isabel and Lena, somewhere safe." Ethan nodded. "Agreed. We'll take them to the lake house." Isabel appeared in the doorway, pale but determined. "If we run, they win." "We're not running," Ethan said. "We're protecting Lena, until we know who's behind this." Daniel turned the laptop around. "I think I do. There's a name buried in the wire transfers. Veritas Strategic Holdings. It's a front. Registered under 3 fake owners, but one real one, a man named Elias Drake." Isabel's face went white. "That's my uncle." Ethan blinked. "Your father's brother." He vanished 20 years ago, she whispered, after a scandal involving the foundation. My father claimed he stole money, but he was smarter than that. He knew everything. Daniel added, he's still alive, and he's funding what's left of the Brooks legacy. My guess? He wanted Margaret to win custody so he could use Lena to resurrect the brand, clean the slate. Until we ruined the plan, Ethan said. Now he's coming after us. From the hallway, Lena appeared, rubbing her eyes. Why are you yelling? Ethan went to her, crouching low. Hey, everything's okay, we're just planning a trip. Lena frowned. To the cabin? Yeah, he smiled. You remember the one I told you about? She nodded. You said we'd have stars and fireflies. That's the one. Outside, a car rolled slowly down the road. Not a black sedan, but a delivery truck. Still, Ethan watched it until it was gone. He turned to Daniel. We leave in 1 hour. Daniel nodded. I'll prep the car. But just as Ethan reached for his keys, the front doorbell rang, and when he opened it, there stood a teenage girl, soaking wet, maybe 16, with the same eyes as Lena. She looked up and whispered, Are you Ethan Holloway? He stared. Yes. She swallowed. I think I'm your daughter too. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft patter of rain dripping from the girl's hair onto the porch. She stood shivering, her eyes wide and scared, her soaked hoodie clinging to her thin frame. Ethan couldn't move. The words she'd just spoken echoed inside him with the force of a thunderclap. I think I'm your daughter too. Behind him, Isabel appeared in the doorway, her face tightening as she took in the sight of the girl. Lena peeked out from behind her mother, her sleepy gaze sharpening with curiosity. Ethan finally found his voice. Come inside. The girl hesitated, then stepped over the threshold. Ethan grabbed a towel from the coat rack and wrapped it around her shoulders. She flinched at the touch but didn't pull away. What's your name? Isabel asked gently. Alina, the girl said. Alina Hart. Ethan sat across from her at the kitchen table. Alina, how did you find me? My mom, she died 2 months ago, she said, her voice cracking. Cancer. Before she passed, she gave me a letter. It had your name, said you were my father, that she never told you because she didn't want to ruin your life. Ethan sat back, stunned. Who was your mother? Juliana Hart, Alina said. She said you were together, briefly, 19 years ago. She said you never knew. Daniel stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the scene quickly, silently. Ethan's mind reeled. Juliana. The name struck a faint chord, a summer internship, a whirlwind of meetings and late nights. He hadn't thought of her in years. She worked for Holloway Enterprises, he murmured. She was an assistant during my first year out of college. Alina nodded. She said she never meant to get pregnant, but she kept me anyway. Raised me alone. We moved a lot. She never said much about you until the end. Isabel placed a hand on Ethan's arm. We'll get a test, we'll do it right. Alina nodded quickly. I already did one. My mom had it done in case I ever came looking. I have it here. She pulled a folded document from her bag, edges worn from being handled over and over. Ethan opened it. The seal was official. The results, 99.97% match. He looked up at her, emotions crashing like waves, guilt, awe, disbelief. Alina, he began, but she cut him off. I don't want anything, she said. I'm not here for money, I don't have anyone, and when I saw you on the news after the custody case, I hoped maybe... Ethan stood and crossed to her, kneeling gently in front of her chair. You have me, he said softly. If you'll let me be there for you. Her lips trembled. You don't even know me. I didn't know Lena either, he said. But I'm learning. I want to learn you too. Lena stepped forward, her gaze cautious. So does that mean I have a sister? Alina looked at her, then gave the smallest smile. If you want one. Lena nodded. I do. The three of them stood together, 2 daughters, 1 father, tied now not by the years lost, but by the ones they still had left. And in the corner, Daniel's phone buzzed again. He read the message. Then his face went pale. "They found the cabin." Daniel's voice dropped like a stone in the silence. "They found the cabin." Ethan rose to his feet. "What do you mean? Who?" Daniel turned the screen toward him. On it was a grainy photo of the lake house taken from across the water, zoomed in, time-stamped just minutes earlier. Beneath it was a single line of text from an encrypted source. "We know where the girl is. Leave now." Ethan grabbed the phone, reading it again. "How the hell did they find it?" Isabel leaned on the counter, her face pale. "Elias." Daniel nodded grimly. He must have had the place watched for years. It was always the contingency. Ethan's hands shook as he looked to his daughters. "We have to go now, not to the cabin, somewhere else, somewhere no one knows." "I have a safe house," Daniel said quickly. "Off the grid. Northern woods, no cell service, solar-powered. I used it when I was tracking our father's offshore accounts." Ethan turned to Isabel. "Can you travel?" She nodded slowly. "With help?" "We'll get you there," he said. "All of us, together." Daniel began packing immediately. Medical supplies, cash, burner phones. Ethan helped Isabel gather her things while Lena clung to Alina, the two girls instinctively gravitating toward one another in the rising tension. Outside, the sky had grown darker again, storm clouds swirling low and fast. Rain threatened, wind already rattling the windows. It felt like the earth itself was warning them. Ethan loaded the SUV in silence, his mind racing. 2 daughters, one love he nearly lost, and a past unraveling faster than he could contain. Alina pulled him aside as Lena went to say goodbye to Mrs. Crane. "Are you sure you want this?" she asked. "Me, I mean." Ethan met her gaze, steady and strong. "I didn't know you existed. But now that I do, yes, absolutely. You're mine. No matter what the past was, we write the future." Alina swallowed hard and nodded, tears catching in her lashes. Just then, a black motorcycle roared down the street. Ethan saw it only for a second, just enough to catch the insignia painted on the side, a black falcon over a gold key, Elias Drake's symbol. "They're here," he said sharply. Daniel floored the SUV out of the driveway before the rider could even circle back. Behind them, the motorcycle peeled off into pursuit, but Daniel turned down a narrow dirt road Ethan didn't even know existed. They drove for hours, off the highway, down winding back roads, through forests thick with pine. Night fell, and still they pressed on. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, they reached a weather-worn cabin nestled deep in the woods, barely visible under the canopy. No power lines, no neighbors, no tracks in or out. As they settled inside, Isabel curled up on the couch, weak but smiling as Lena nestled against her. Alina sat nearby, watching them with cautious wonder. Ethan stood guard at the window, Daniel beside him, rifle slung across his shoulder. "You think he'll come here?" Ethan asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. Then finally he said, "No, he won't come here." Ethan turned to him. "Why?" "Because he doesn't need to." Daniel looked grim. "Elias Drake doesn't chase people. He makes them run, until they break." And in the trees beyond the clearing, a red light blinked once, then vanished. Morning crept in slowly, filtered through the dense canopy of trees that surrounded the cabin. The forest held an eerie stillness, as if it too were watching, waiting. Inside, the silence was broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the rustle of blankets as the girls stirred. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat by the front window, his eyes fixed on the trees, the rifle Daniel had handed him resting across his lap. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig outside made his heart pound. Daniel returned from a sweep of the perimeter. No signs of movement, no drones, no tracks. "He hasn't found us yet?" Ethan looked up. "That blinking light in the wood..." Daniel nodded. "Could have been a camera. Or a decoy. But it means he's close," Ethan muttered. Daniel sat across from him. "He'll test us first. See if we panic. Then he'll apply pressure." Ethan's gaze drifted to the back room where Isabel lay sleeping, her breathing shallow, her strength clearly fading. Alina sat beside her, brushing damp hair from her forehead, while Lena quietly sketched something on the cabin floor with a piece of charcoal. "Isabel's getting worse," Ethan said. "We'll need a hospital," Daniel replied. "But if we leave now, we're exposed." Ethan stood. "Then we bring the hospital here." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You want to call in a mobile team?" "I'll pay whatever it takes," Ethan said. "We can't move her again." Daniel nodded. "I'll arrange it. I know a contact who used to run black site med extractions. Quiet, discreet, no questions." Ethan's hands trembled as he poured coffee, his mind drifting back to the courtroom, to the moment Lena reached for him and called him Dad. He'd won that battle, but this war, this shadow war, was something else entirely. Elias Drake wasn't trying to win custody. He was trying to erase a bloodline. Outside, the sun rose higher, and for a few hours, peace returned. The girls played by the fire. Isabel managed to eat half a piece of toast. Ethan and Daniel reinforced the cabin's doors, set up a crude alarm system using cans and fishing line, anything that could buy them seconds of warning. Late that afternoon, the satellite phone Daniel had brought buzzed sharply. He answered. "Go," a gruff voice replied. "Package is en route. ETA 1 hour. 4 medics, armed escort." Ethan took the phone. "Tell them not to use lights, no sirens, nothing that draws attention." The voice agreed. "Understood." As the line went dead, a knock sounded on the back wall. 2 taps, then 1. Daniel pulled his weapon, signaled Ethan. They crept to the rear door and opened it slowly. Standing there, hands raised, was a man in his 50s, weathered face, military stance, calm eyes. "My name is Noah Griggs," he said. "I used to work with Robert Holloway." Ethan stared. "My father." Griggs nodded. "He sent me to watch over Isabel, a long time ago, and he left me instructions. If Elias Drake ever came after the girl, I was to find you." He reached into his coat and pulled out a letter, yellowed, sealed with the Holloway crest. "It's time you learned the truth," he said, "about your father, about Elias, and about why Lena's life is more valuable than you know." Ethan took the letter with trembling hands, the weight of it almost too much to bear. The Holloway crest stamped into the seal stared back at him like a ghost from another life, one of cold boardrooms and silent betrayals. He peeled it open slowly, the crackle of old paper sounding like thunder in the quiet room. The handwriting was unmistakable, precise, slanted, and unmistakably his father's. "Ethan, if you're reading this, then Elias Drake has returned. And if he has, then everything I feared is now in motion. I wasn't always a good man, but I tried to protect you from the worst parts of me, and of our family. The Brooks and Holloway bloodlines were never clean. They were built on secrets, forged in deception. You and Isabel. You were supposed to be our chance at redemption. Lena was never just a child. She's the convergence, the unifying heir, the one with both legacies. Elias knows this, and he will do anything to control her. Don't let him. I've hidden the final ledger. It holds the names, the numbers, the proof of everything we did. If you expose it, you destroy him, but it comes at a cost. Look for the lighthouse, the place where everything began. I'm sorry for the silence, for the lies, but I never stopped watching, and I never stopped loving you." Robert Ethan let the letter drop to the table as the words burned into his mind. "The lighthouse," he whispered. "He told me stories about it, said it was the only place he ever felt peace." Daniel leaned in. "We find it. We find the ledger." Griggs nodded. "Drake's afraid of that document. That's why he's moving now. If you get it before he does, you cut the head off the snake." Ethan looked at Isabel, who was now awake, her eyes glassy but alert. "You knew there was something more." She nodded slowly. "My father and yours. They built their empires together. But the moment I told my father I was pregnant, he panicked, because he realized what Lena could mean. Control of both bloodlines. He tried to erase her before she was born." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Then we end this, for good." Griggs placed a weathered map on the table, tracing a route to the coast. "The lighthouse is in Maine, hidden on private land. Drake knows it exists, but he's never found it yet. Daniel pointed at the road. "We leave tonight." Isabel gripped Ethan's hand. "Take Lena with you." "No," Ethan said instantly. "She stays with you. I'm not risking her." "She won't be safe anywhere," Isabel whispered. "Not until this ends." Ethan looked at his daughters, Lena drawing quietly, Alina alert and protective. 2 lives now bound to his, 2 reasons to fight harder than he ever had. He turned back to Griggs. "Then we go as a family." But in the shadows beyond the cabin, a drone hovered unseen, its camera blinking silently. And miles away, in a cold stone building, Elias Drake watched the feed, a faint smile curling on his lips. "They've taken the bait," he said. Behind him, a vault slowly opened, revealing another letter. And this one had Ethan's name, written in Isabel's handwriting. The drive to the coast was cloaked in tension. The SUV moved through winding forest roads and abandoned highways under the cover of darkness. Headlights off, guided only by the dull green glow of the GPS Daniel had preloaded with the map coordinates. Isabel lay in the back, swaddled in blankets, her breathing steady but shallow. Lena curled beside her, her head on her mother's shoulder, one hand clutching Alina's. Ethan sat in the front passenger seat, the Holloway letter folded tightly in his fist, his mind running in endless loops. Behind them, Noah Griggs followed in a second vehicle, alert, armed, and silent. He hadn't said another word since revealing the map. He didn't need to. Daniel drove with focus, eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. "We're an hour out," Ethan nodded. "When we get there, we move fast, no hesitation. We find the ledger, copy it, transmit it, and then disappear." "And if Drake's already there?" Daniel asked. "Then we end it," Ethan said, voice cold. "One way or another." The sun was just beginning to rise when the ocean came into view, vast, grey and churning beneath the early light. The lighthouse stood alone on a jagged bluff, its skeletal silhouette rising from the rocks like a sentinel from another age. The path to it was overgrown, the gate rusted shut. Griggs cut it open with bolt cutters. They approached the lighthouse in silence. Inside, dust covered the wooden floors, and old nautical maps hung from the walls. Ethan led the way up the spiral staircase, heart pounding, each creak of the boards echoing like a shot. At the top, beneath a floorboard, just as the letter described, they found a metal box. Inside, papers, names, offshore accounts. Donations from both the Brooks and Holloway estates to shell companies, fake clinics and political campaigns. And one final envelope, addressed in Isabel's handwriting. Ethan opened it with shaking hands. "Ethan, if you found this, then I'm already gone. There's something I never told you, not out of fear, but out of guilt. Lena is more than just the union of 2 powerful families. She was born with a rare gene, one identified by a foundation my father secretly funded. It's a gene that links to cognitive capabilities we're only beginning to understand. They want her not for her name, but for what's in her blood. That's why I ran, not just from shame, but to protect her from becoming a lab experiment in a billion-dollar war over genetics. If you love her, and I know you do, burn this letter. Burn the ledger and take her far away. Be her father, not her savior. I've been both, and it broke me." Isabel Ethan staggered back, the wind howling through the lighthouse's broken glass. Below, the sound of engines echoed off the rocks. Griggs appeared in the doorway. "They're here." Ethan turned to Daniel. "Take the girls. Get them out." "What about you?" "I'll buy you time." Down below, black SUVs pulled up fast. Inside one of them, Elias Drake stepped out, calm, smiling, holding something in his hand. It was the original letter, the one Isabel never sent. And on the back of it was a second map. Not to a lighthouse, but to Lena's blood, and the secret it carried.